Hey guys, my name is Rai. Today I wanted to go through how I did my plus 19 Priory on my Preservation Evoker. A couple months ago I released a plus 14 video, but things have changed quite a bit since then. Not only has my approach changed, but this route has changed on a high key level quite considerably. This keystone was resilient, and it did take us a couple attempts just to be able to figure out how to do the first pull without Mindsoothe. However, once we got it down, I was actually able to one-shot the key right after we got through the first boss. Now, in this keystone, I'm going to be showing you and walking you through every skip, every healing ramp, and all the approaches I took with commentary on how to do this as Preservation Evoker, and hopefully maybe too, if you don't play Prez, this might teach you a couple things on how to approach this dungeon without Mindsoothe or Powered Shield. I do have about 30% haste in this keystone, and I would really recommend if you're trying to progress this keystone on Preservation, you go for a higher haste value, upwards of 20% at least. The reason why is Lifebind is insanely valuable in this key, and I'm going to show you why. In this first pull, my Vengeance Demon Hunter is going to be misery skipping the first 4 mobs, and we're going to be using a combination of Sleepwalk and Cage to skip these 2 knights. If you haven't seen this pull before, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be treading the line between these 2 knights in this dungeon and pulling into Captain Dailcry. The reason why is these knights are deadly and a huge waste of time. What we want is to put all our damage into the first knight captain, I don't know what we call him, Dailcry, but Sullivan, and using AoE stops and all the casters up in the corner. You're going to see here that I sleepwalk the sharpshooter and we cage this footman and we hug left. This does negate the need for Mindsoothe in this first pull, but you do have to be very careful about hugging left here, as if you get too close, you're going to still social the footman on the right. We do walk by this first 3 back and bring the sharpshooter footman combo into guard Captain Sullivan. This is a pretty hard pull, and I would not recommend doing this without comms or at least having practiced once or twice. I go into this pull and immediately put out reversions with Temporal Anomaly and start prepping my entire ramp with Lifebind. In Bloodlust, I am going to be just committing Stasis, Tip the Scales, and keeping Lifebind up as much as possible. The predominant reason why is any combination of Thunderclap plus Potshot on any of my team members is going to wipe them out. So through this pull, I am making sure I'm alternating things like Zephyr, Obsidian Scales, and keeping my team at 100% health as much as I possibly can. You'll see how much I often spend that echo on my party, and I worry less about damage here. That's because if anybody goes down, this pull is going to get exponentially harder, meaning that if I lose a DPS in Bloodlust and CDs, this captain's going to live for longer, I'm going to have to deal with more Thunderclaps, and as well, I'm going to have to heal more pot shots. I do spend Cauterize there, clearing the bleed from the trap on my tank, and we do manage to get through this first pull. I would really recommend using things like not only Lifebind, but keeping an active use of a healing cooldown at all times. If you feel like you need to cover an entire ramp with Emerald Communion or Rewind, I would just slam it as soon as that Thunderclap goes out. If you don't have Lifebind active, you want to keep your team topped at all times, so making sure that you just rewind instinctively and just keep pressing that echo, verdant embrace over and over again while you're in Bloodlust is going to be your highest HPS and your highest success at this keystone. When fighting Sergeant Chainmail, you're going to want to use one important tip. Anytime this lunging strike goes out, you want to warp in a different direction, preferably away from your team. You can completely dodge this mechanic on multiple classes, including Evoker, so if you stay about 10-15 yards away and just blink through the boss or away from the boss and away from your team, you can completely dodge this lunging strike as I do right there. If your team members do happen to get lunged, you can clear this debuff once with Cauterize. However, I just wasted my Cauterize here on a dog jump, and now I'm out of hover charges and get hit here. That is okay. If I do manage to get hit, I'm going to be hitting that Obsidian Scales and that Renewing Blaze to make sure that I'm topped up. Otherwise, this pull shouldn't be too hard, and if you're doing any variation of this pull, just make sure that you're healing up your team as much as possible, but I would really recommend saving Stasis and Tip the Scales for the pull upstairs. I do sacrifice a bit of overall damage by not using Tip the Scales here because it is going to give me that Threads of Fate buff, which is going to give my party multi-strike. However, the next pull that we're going to be fighting in this dungeon is double Lightspawn. Double Lightspawn can be pretty tricky to heal, and I would recommend at least having one set of healing CDs for it. That's because you're going to have to be dealing with 2 Lightspawn Purifying Beams at the same time. This pull is again pretty stop and kick heavy, and I'm coordinating with my team when I need to use my stops on my Evoker. Our very first Lightspawn fixate here does go on our DK, and it does allow me to negate and postpone a little bit of my healing ramp. However, I do start setting up that Echo, 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 Verdant Embrace into Lifebind for the next one, and I will be hitting that Stasis, Tip the Scale Spirit Bloom, TA, and Dream Breath to cover all of the passive healing. Anytime in this keystone I do get targeted by one of these Lightspawns, I'm always pressing either Tip the Scales, Life Spark, and then keeping a defensive on myself active. Here you'll see that we get double Lightspawn Fixate, and this is the perfect time to release that Stasis. I would always make sure you have a defensive running. Keep Obsidian Scales or that Renewing Blaze active when you're getting targeted by Lightspawn, and if your team member is, this is a great time to use something like Rescue, like Time Dilate, or hitting one of those bigger healing buttons like Emerald Communion. One important note here is you will see that in these individual healing ramps, I am using any combination of Echo, Life Spark Chronoflame, Verdant Embrace, Spirit Bloom, and then towards the end of my healing ramp, I'm going to be using Echo into Reversion. As key level goes up, Preservation becomes more powerful as Reversion and specifically Golden Hours scale more with the damage you've taken. Meaning that if my mage is taking a ton of damage over 5 seconds, my Echo Reversion, which what you're about to see, watch very carefully here, instantly heals my mage to full. This is an insanely powerful tactic, and again too, as key level goes up, Preservation just gets better and better for some of these passive healing effects. In lower keys, this feels quite a bit less impactful, as your Golden Hours might only be healing for 2 or 3% of your party's health. However, as you get into high keys, if you can start recognizing damage patterns and using that Echo Reversion to heal over damage time effects, it's going to do a ton of healing. As we're fighting High Priest Amia, I need to be cognizant of this Reflective Shield. Any combination of a bolt with the shield cast can easily delete somebody off my team, so I'm going to want to make sure here that I either have a healing ramp available or I'm topping my team member at all times. This is again a very stop heavy pull, as we're going to be gripping this all into Solar Beam and rotating things like our stops from our mage, our druid, myself, and utilizing that Oppressing Roar synced up with Sigil of Silence. Preservation Evoker is amazing in this key because not only do you have tail and wing buffets, you can spec for Deep Breath stun if your team needs an additional stun, and Oppressing Roar increases the duration on both Chaos Nova by 1 second and Sigil of Silence by 2 seconds, meaning that you have 3 seconds of additional stops just in that button alone. That's pretty powerful for on a pull like this. It's very easy to overlap and fall behind. Any combination of this Reflective Shield and a cast on my party member could easily just take them out, and as you're going to see here, I'm starting to think about if I need to use things like Time Dilation or a big healing CD to get my team recovered. I do hit that rewind there to get my team stable, and as well now we're looking back at making sure I can recover my team with a sneaky Time Dilation. I always like to recommend too that you have a stasis ramp here just in case your team takes a lot of damage. As you can see there, mine did go to expiration, but I could have released it early. If I need to as well, I do have Tip the Scales to help cover a damage event, but I also don't want to be overhealing too much. The next pull in the dungeon for me is going to be the boss, so I do want to make sure I have some buttons available to deal with this pretty difficult encounter. We do unfortunately deal with this last Reflective Shield from the High Priest, which does kind of suck and eat about 15 seconds in our key, but that is alright, as the next pull is going to be the boss, and we are pretty speedy in this keystone. We are going to be hugging right, and you can actually do this without Mindsoothe, which is awesome, is that this pat doesn't need Mindsoothe at all. We're going to be pulling the Sharpshooter Warlings pack on the right into the boss, and making sure that we can get enough healing to cover any of the pot shots and the Lynx leaps. We do CC and Sheep to these mobs, they'll be coming in later for our Arcane Mage funnel. This boss healing cooldown timing is extremely awkward, but the most important thing is keeping your team topped through these sharp shots and as well the Savage Mauling or Holy Radiance overlap. I ramped Stasis and Tip the Scales super early on this pull, and if you watch my old video, I only like to commit Tip the Scales once in this encounter, so I have it for the Paladin pull. Immediately here, I go into a Lifebind, and I start pre-healing. I want all my healing out to deal with and top my team with these pot shots, so that they don't have to deal with getting globaled by a pot shot Holy Radiance combo. You'll see there alone, if my Druid wasn't at full health before that, he might have just died. I release my stasis and get my team topped. This is one of the only encounters in this dungeon, maybe even this season, where I find myself releasing stasis shortly after it's been stored, and that's because there's no good stasis timing on this fight. The time in between Holy Radiances is too awkward to prepare a stasis during one and release it during the next unless you do it very late. I do like to start ramping my stasis early on things like the Savage Maul or maybe some of the Sharpshooter overlaps and then releasing it during the Holy Radiance. During every single one of this Holy Radiance, you're going to notice that same combo that starts off the healing, which is Echo, 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 Verdant Embrace into Spirit Bloom. These Savage Mauls can be very, very, very deadly, and I would really recommend on your Druid, your Mage, your Shaman, or any squishier class you might play with to always have something ready to assist them. This is keeping Echoes out, this is having Rescue ready or Time Dilate ready. Remember, in addition to this, your class does have access to Cauterize, which is an amazing tank defensive on this encounter. I'm only using Cauterize to make sure that I cover my tank when he doesn't have a big tank defensive like Metamorphosis, Fiery Brand, or Fell Devastation. Again, Holy Radiance comes out here, and on every single one of these Radiances, I'm alternating Obsidian Scales or Renewed Blaze and calling for a raid cooldown. There's absolutely no reason why I shouldn't be using these things, as I won't need or I'll be overstacking them on this encounter as I can't get Savage Mauled. For my DPS, however, it is important that I do have some assistance for them, like Time Dilate or that Rescue. I am getting ready to commit the second stasis of the encounter. As I go into my next Lifebind window, I stasis, I tip the scales, I TA, and I Dream Breath, and I release my stasis early. The reason why, again, I release my stasis early here is 1, there's no good timing, and 2, the length of the Holy Radiance is often awkward enough where you're going to need a lot of healing to get through it. At this point in the encounter, I would really like to keep both Rewinds and Tip the Scales available. However, if I needed to swap up my decision making and hit that Rewind or Tip to make sure my team lives, Preservation is exceptionally strong at being able to heal through the Paladins, so I could come up with a secondary action plan. As this boss is about to go down, I do set up for this last healing ramp with that Echo, 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 Verdant Embrace, Chrono Flame from Lifespark proc into Spirit Bloom. Preservation throughput is insane, and you can get through this boss very, very easily with just a couple of those easy combos. Remember, if you're getting ready for Holy Radiance, Echo, 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 Verdant Spirit Bloom, TA, Dream Breath, and pair it with any sort of defensive button like Zephyr, like Obsidian Scales, or that Renewed Blaze. If you are in communication with your team, this is also a great time for those raid defensives. Because we are so fast, our team does want to split up the Paladin pool, which actually sucks for me. Healing 5 Paladins on Preservation is very easy, and it actually makes it a little bit harder when we break up the Paladins. However, as you're going to see here, as we're fighting 3, basically all I need is that Tip the Scales and Bloodlust in conjunction with that Lifebind effect. Just like the first pull, I kind of want to remind you that anytime you have Bloodlust and Tip the Scales, your Lifebind is instantly going to carry all the healing you need on this pull, and you don't really need to press anything else. You'll see here that I don't even commit Stasis, I don't commit Rewinds, and I don't even commit charges of Obsidian Scales during Bloodlust and Lifebind. I hit that Renewed Blaze there, and Renewed Blaze basically covers this entire Paladin AoE, and you can see that anytime we're even ticked by these Paladins, we're completely topped. I would say that if you're going to approach the 5 Paladin pull, this is also the approach you should be taking. As you're in Bloodlust and Tip the Scales, you should not be overcommitting, and you want to be using your healing buttons when you're out of Bloodlust. You will have almost permanent Lifebind uptime during this period, so ramping your stasis early then releasing it really, really, really late is going to help you immensely. In this pull, I do make a pretty big blunder, which I'll be showing you what happens after this pull in the Keystone. I do commit stasis on this first Paladin AoE, and now after these 2 casters die, we're going to be chaining them into doing a 5 Paladin pull. I do commit Obsidian Scales there, I start ramping my stasis, and now I have it stored. However, our team's a little bit wishy-washy on what we want to do. I call to commit to killing the casters and then CCing and going to the next Paladin pull, but I think we are on a little bit of a different page as we do end up pulling all the Paladins at once with a bunch of different casters. Why this gets scary is the next pull becomes exceptionally complicated because we're going to be fighting 5 Paladins with no Bloodlust, and we end up losing to some kicks. Remember here, I have Tip the Scales coming up in about 10 seconds. I have Rewinds, I have Zephyr if I need to, I have Obsidian Scales, but now I need to figure out a pattern to be able to deal with 5 Paladins without Bloodlust. I early on here hit Rewind for that first Lifebind, I hit Tip the Scales on the second, and now I'm pretty much hasted and I'm going to have Lifebind cover up all the rest of the healing on this encounter. I do commit a big Fire Breath there to top my team, and I'm back into those Lifebind combos as I hit another Lifebind to get my team topped. Why this is now scary is we are starting to fall behind on kicks. We are a little bit behind on stops, and I do have to hit that Emerald Communion early. I hit a big Spirit Bloom. My team is mostly top, but now I'm falling behind. You'll see here that where the nail in the coffin is our DK did just die to kicks, and I just was in a position where I needed that AMS. We survive one tick here. I do have to move away from this fire puddle on the ground. I go into Lifebind. I hit Spirit Bloom, but this is where we start to fall apart. With no kicks active, we do start to blunder a little bit here, and this is where we lose our first teammate. To be fair, I did have buttons here, I did have Rescue, and as well I had Spirit Bloom, but I wanted to make sure that I was able to use it to top my team. I blunder and I don't hit Zephyr here as I go almost down to a kick, and this last hole goes off, which kills off our DK. Fortunately, we do recover here, but this was an exceptionally hard pull that I was not ready for. I think if I had maybe saved my stasis from the first pull, we could have gotten through it, but doing 5 Paladins without Bloodlust and any healing CDs, and then losing our Death Knight as he pressed his buttons, kind of set us back quite a bit. We are okay though, as we do manage to recover, and now we're going to be walking backwards and pulling Tanner. Tanner is going to be being pulled by our Demon Hunter, who's going to be melding here in a second so that we can pull him away from the Night Pack and into the Lynx Pack on the left of the map up here. The reason why we want to do this is we want to avoid these Knights. Remember at the start I talked about how deadly these Knights could be and how much resource they actually take. Any one of those bleeds on 17, 18, 19 can easily take out one of your DPS members, and in conjunction maybe with a pot shot or a link sleep, it is a very quick recipe for death. Going into Tanner, I'm not too worried here, and this is going to be the exact same thing as dealing with one of the earlier pulls in the dungeon, which is these Lynxes. Anytime one of these Lynx jumps goes out, you can instantly top it with a Life Spark proc, a Burn Embrace, or even maybe almost an Echo Reversion. I do commit Tip the Scales here for fun and stasis, as I'm just going to be releasing it as I think I need to. But I think ever since the buffs to Preservation a couple weeks ago, when we saw that massive buff to Living Flame, our spot healing is absolutely nuts. I can easily top somebody very easily with a Life Spark proc or an Echo Reversion Life Spark proc or even an Echo Verdant Embrace, as Lifebind now is even more powerful too, with Spirit Bloom being shared healing. As the pot shots die from the sharpshooters and, Tanner's almost dead, we're going to be pulling this into boss. You might have seen this in a couple of the MDI routes where you end up taking Tanner into the boss for full funnel, but we do decide to just kind of kill him off here to make sure that this next boss isn't too complicated. Baron Braunpyke is a ton of fun on Prez, and I'm going to show you the new method and approach that I've been taking when fighting this encounter. On every single one of these Castigator shields, you can start pre-ramping with that Echo, 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 Burn Embrace, and then Spirit Bloom, and then releasing it on the soaks. But I'm going to show you the best cadence that I really like on this encounter to be able to deal with this boss fight. On the very first Castigator shield of the encounter, I'm going to be ramping that Stasis, using Tip the Scales on a different set and using Stasis on this set. I use that Echo, 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 Burn Embrace, Spirit Bloom, TA, Dream Breath, and as well now I have that entire stasis stored to release on the next set of Castigator shields. Why this is really nice is this is going to line up amazing for the 2-minute mark in the encounter. When I hit the 2-minute mark, we are going to be dealing with a 5-stack soak, which is going to let me have stasis for both the Castigator shield and as well the expiration. So now I have stasis available for this Castigator shield, which I'm going to be releasing here. And then I'm going to have Tip the Scales for the 5-stack soak. I am going to be hitting Zephyr, and one important note is you're going to see that I time dilate my DK. If I time dilate my DK here, his AMS can actually soak through and soak all 5 orbs at once. You might see this with other specs such as Discipline Priest or, using that pain suppression or powered shield to increase the absorption cap of their AMS, but Time Dilate works great on Prez as he's going to be able to soak all 5 without taking too many debuffs. As you can see here, I have everybody ramped with some echoes. I hit that Verdant Embrace, I hit that Spirit Bloom with that Tip to Scales, and my team's health almost doesn't move. One mistake we did make is we did commit both Zephyr and AMZ there, but I'm not really that concerned as my throughput's pretty high on this encounter, and the spells seem to line up really well with my cooldowns. On this next Castigator Shield, I'm going to be performing the same combo as I go into Echo, 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 Verdant Embrace, and I should have been pressing Spirit Bloom there, but I do end up hitting Rewind. I don't really know why I did that. I think it was just a little bit of a blunder on my end. I think I stopped casting the Spirit Bloom, then kind of panicked. But it doesn't really matter too much, as on the 3 soaks, your team should be pretty healthy. If you do not have a Death Knight or a Rogue in your group or a Paladin that can solo soak these orbs, one really helpful tip is just saving Renewing Blaze for yourself, and you can always help your team soak on this boss. As key level goes up, this does get a little bit harder, so you might need to be a little bit more clever in how you want to use your offensive and defensive cooldowns in this encounter. But on Evoker, it is pretty simple to be able to soak once or twice with just alternating Renewing Blaze and Obsidian Scales. On this healing ramp, I do go into that Stasis release, which I was talking about earlier. I did prep my Stasis on the Castigator Shield, then release it on the 5 stack, and even without a big raid CD, we were more than okay. Again, looking at my buttons, I have Emerald Communion available, I have Tip the Scales coming up in about 25 seconds, and all I really have to do is passively heal up my team, and then deal with this pretty easy 3 stack. I do hit Renewing Blaze there for fun, I hit that Verdant Embrace into Spirit Bloom, and my mage just hits Mass Barrier for a little bit of comfort. I don't think I need Mass Barrier anywhere else, so that is an okay comp from him, and we're off to being able to deal with the very last soak of the encounter. The very last soak of the encounter for us is going to be a 5 stack soak, and guess what I have back is that trusty old Tip the Scales. Tip the Scales in conjunction with Spirit Bloom is going to carry my team pretty hard here as I hit Tip on the Castigator Shields. I'm fully hasted, I hit Zephyr, Echo, 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 Verdant Embrace, and as you can see there, I Time Dilate my Death Knight again. This allows him to get that absorption cap and make sure that he takes none of the debuff and solo soak the entire 5 on his own. As Braunpyke goes down, I don't need to worry about too much from a healing perspective, as the next pull is only 2 Paladins and is going to be pretty easy. If I needed to on this encounter, I could have easily committed Emerald Communion. I could have definitely planned a little bit differently too around my use of raid defensives, but as we get up here, we are going to be fighting this double Paladin pack. Remember that on double Paladin, this is one of the reasons why I love having about 30% haste. There's no exact number of haste that you need on Preservation, but it does smooth out your gameplay a lot, and I felt like when I dropped it, I struggled a lot to meet some of these combos and these healing checks. As you can see here for that first Divine Toll, I immediately go into that Verdant Embrace, Spirit Bloom, Stasis, and I'm able to top my team up quickly before the second. If you are trying this key with playing really high mastery and low haste, you're going to struggle a ton on these Paladins, as you're not going to have the time in between mechanics to be able to heal them up. I'm running actually pretty low mastery in this key and about 25% crits. I do kind of like this balance, as I find crit just for the reversion extensions are kind of nice, and it gives me quite a bit of in my throughput. This is pretty nice for damage as well. As you can see at this point in the key, I'm doing about 700k overall, which isn't too bad. I think I could do more if I was a little bit more focused on it, but all I'm really concerned about in this key is doing as much healing as possible. This is almost like a 3 million HPS overall keystone, so making sure you're meeting the throughput checks first and then worrying about damage after is going to help you a lot in this one. As we get upstairs, we are going to be fighting one of the more difficult packs in the keystone, which is the double Paladin Lightspawn pull. For any time anybody gets targeted by a Lightspawn, they're going to need a defensive, because if they get kind of that wombo combo with a Paladin overlap, they're just going to die. On this pull, I actually take every single Lightspawn fixates from the Purify, so you're going to be seeing me alternate a lot of buttons, including Obsidian Scales, Renewing Blaze, and like you saw there, Emerald Communion to top it. This is deadly without a Discipline Priest, and I've noticed a lot too when playing Prez, I feel a lot more scared here. That's because, again, if that Purify goes off in conjunction with a Paladin AoE, somebody's just going to die, and you have to be very, very, very careful about how you use Time Dilate here. I do commit Zephyr on this Paladin AoE with a big Spirit Bloom, and it does save my Druid, and now I'm watching myself very, very carefully, and I hit that rewind. It is really unfortunate because if this Purify beam had gone on literally anybody else, we have 3 Shadow Melts in the group, it would have made it a lot easier for me, but I do manage to get through it okay. On this very last one, I am terrified. I call for potentially a Mass Barrier, and I hit that Rescue. Luckily, we are able to get through that very last Lightspawn fixate without anybody dying. I would say doing these pulls is a little bit of an art, but more importantly, using any button you can at this point in the dungeon is going to help you a ton. Don't be afraid to hit the Emerald Communion early to help yourself live. Don't be afraid to hit Time Dilate or Rescue on other party members, and think proactively. Use Obsidian Scales and Renewing Blaze on every single one of those damage events, alternate them. Use Zephyr on a damage event if you have neither, and make sure you're keeping up that Lifebind effect. You'll see that on all of these pulls, you're always going to see me have Lifebind active, and I'm going to keep it active as much as I can throughout this entire dungeon. The reason why, there's so much spot random periodic damage, and Lifebind's going to passively heal that over 5 seconds. Not only is your Spirit Bloom effect really going to tick into Lifebind, but any other passive healing is going to contribute to that Lifebind effect as well. Sometimes casts go out, sometimes you're going to have to deal with these random Purify beams, these footmen exploding, or as well any other damage effect, and Lifebind is going to passively heal up your team to full. One important note here is that I really cannot afford to press Stasis or tip the scales on this pull, as the next pull is going to be Sir Braunpyke. This is our last pull in the dungeon, and probably the hardest healing check of the entire dungeon itself, so I need to make sure I have the following things. I want to make sure I have Stasis, Tip the Scales, and one of Emerald Communion or Rewind. In an ideal world, I have all of these buttons and Zephyr as well, but one thing I'm going to have to note is as soon as I go into this pull, I'm going to want to be immediately activating my Stasis, going into a Lifebind ramp, and making sure that I have that Tip the Scales out. That's because I'm going to be trying to keep as close to 100% uptime on Lifebind as possible during Bloodlust. The second note is I want to release my Stasis very late. The whole idea of keeping Stasis late is to maximize your Dream Breath uptime. I am running double time in this keystone, which is going to mean that my Dream Breath is going to tick for an additional amount depending on what level of crit I have. So that uptime is going to be very high. But releasing my Stasis late is going to help cover me for when I have no buttons available. The number one reason why you want to release Stasis late on Prez is use it as a gap filler. I see so many evokers just prep Stasis and then release it without thinking about the buttons they have available. But often, if you have Spirit Bloom or Dream Breath off CD, you do not want to release Stasis as you're just wasting those buttons altogether. As I go into this pull, immediately I'm going into that Echo, Verdant Embrace, Spirit Bloom with Tip the Scales, and now I'm in Stasis. I am slamming Fire Breath on CD as Life Giver's Force and Life Mender's Flame is going to be doing a ton of healing as well. But as you're going to see right now, I'm not using Obsidian Scales, I'm not using Renewing Blaze, and all I'm relying on for the entire first part of this encounter is Lifebind. Watch carefully how when I heal this, all I'm trying to do is let my passive healing do all the work for me so I can focus on saving my big healing CDs for later in the encounter. Watch my Lifebind effect right here as it's highlighted in 3 seconds, and watch how quickly it comes back up. Echo, Burn Embrace, into Lifebind, and now I'm back in my next Lifebind window. I'm going to be doing this a ton all the way up until I don't have buttons, and then I'm going to be releasing my Stasis. Again, Fire Breath on CD, I Lifebind again, and then I release my Stasis to maximize that Dream Breath and that Spirit Bloom hot uptime. My party's health is barely moving here, but now I want to be a little bit more careful as these footmen are about to die. I Zephyr a little early and we AMZ a little bit early, but we do have Darkness available, and I just did hit my first charge of Obsidian Scales. This is where I want to start thinking a little bit more proactively about what's going to be happening next. The bulk of this damage is going to be happening now, and I do have healing CDs available. With good planning, this pull is very easy on Prez, as I'm easily able to maintain 5 million HPS and still have buttons left over. Remember, I hit Dark here, and I still have that Communion available. When I hit Emerald Communion, I am going to be getting a 20% health increase from the Emerald Vitality talent, which is going to help me with these last explosions. I do call for my team here that if they drop low, that they do have health bots, G-Invis, and a couple other buttons available. One mistake that I do make here is I could have rescued my druid, but I was expecting him to health bot, so as you see these last two explosions go on, I go into Emerald Communion. Again, I have that 20% increase from Emerald Vitality, and Braunpyke and this Footman are about to explode, and bam. If I didn't have Emerald Communion there, I was dead, even through Obsidian Scales, and the only thing I had to kind of change that was Rescue. However, at that point, saving a global for Rescue can also be pretty deadly if I didn't get the healing off. So we did have one death at the very end of that bowl, not the worst, but could have been prevented, and now we're into the last boss of the dungeon. This boss is no joke for any healer, but I'm going to show you a couple quick tips and hints of how to deal with this as Prez. The two damage patterns you're specifically looking for are Inner Fire and Blinding Light. When Inner Fire goes out, Priory or Prioress is going to be doing ticking damage to your party. In conjunction with the Blinding Light, this is where your party is going to be taking a bulk of the damage. Anytime that Inner Fire happens in conjunction with the Purifying Beam, I need those Echoes out stat, and I want to go into a Lifebind ramp. I hit Stasis and Tip the Scales very early on this encounter because it's going to come back approximately at the time of intermission. You can see how deadly this Inner Fire is, and I'm telling my druid that anytime that he doesn't have Bark Skin available, he should be bear forming them. For the most part, we do also have to worry about these Footmen exploding at death, so I do have another thing on the horizon to look after. Again, Inner Fire is going on here, Blinding Light's about to be cast, I hit Obsidian Scales, I Lifebind, I release that Stasis, and I'm trying to top my team. My DK does get hit by Blinding Light there and die in a swirly, but we do manage to res him pretty quickly. At this point, we only have one res left in our keystone, and the really unfortunate thing is I actually end up going down here. What I should have done was time dilate myself here, but I do go into that Lifebind window, and as Blinding Light is casting, I immediately hit that Spirit Plume, and I just straight up die. A couple things I could have done to avoid this were I was sitting on 2 charges of Warp, so I was missing a 20% damage reduction. I did have Time Dilate available, and I did have Rewind. I do want to save Rewind for the last part of this encounter, but I could have saved myself pretty easily with a little bit better planning. I hit Renewing Blaze here, and I'm starting to think about what's going to have to need to be used in the intermission. Again, Lifebind and Spirit Bloom are your best friends in this encounter. It's going to be really hard to get full Dream Breath uptime on your team, but now on this timing for this key, I do have Stasis back right away into the intermission. I'm going to be putting those Echoes out into that Stasis, Spirit Bloom, TA, and watch really carefully what I do here. I have my Stasis active with that TA and Spirit Bloom already, but you can see that my Dream Breath is still on cooldown. I'm not panicking and filling this with random buttons for my team. I'm waiting very carefully for that Dream Breath to come back. That Dream Breath is very valuable on this encounter as there's a lot of periodic and ticking dot damage, and putting any other button in my Stasis is going to be useless. I have Zephyr rolling for a 20% damage reduction. My team has HOTS available on them already with Spirit Bloom and Pre-Echoes, and now all I have to do is hold off a second, do a little bit of healer damage, and then you're going to see here I hit that Dream Breath. Again, Dream Breath is very valuable here, so I want to make sure that it's in my Stasis and stored for a good release to heal some of the rot damage after. As I get to the back of this encounter, I want to start thinking about what buttons I have available for the next Blinding Light. I have no charges of Obsidian Scales. I have 2 charges of Warp, I have Rescue, and Time Dilate. But I also have Tip the Scales, Rewind, Emerald Communion, and the Stasis. As I go ahead and release that Stasis, I make sure that my team has the Lifebond on it, and they're completely topped for the AoE. Unfortunately, my timing was kind of bad, and I didn't get Dream Breath on everybody. It was just on 3 out of 5 of our party members. But that's okay, as we're now just dealing with a little bit of passive rot. Echo, Echo, Echo. Burn Embrace is going to be my next combo. You can see how hard the Inner Fire actually ticks on +19. I would really recommend, respecting it and making sure that for any one of these overlaps, you have a big healing CD or a raid CD. For there, for instance, I did commit that Tip the Scales, and for every single one of those combos, I'm either going to be using Tip the Scales, Stasis, Emerald Communion, or Rewind. This boss is almost dead, but I do have this Inner Fire and one more Blinding Light to deal with as I go into that Lifebind here. We get Purified, I Spirit Bloom to top my team, and now I'm going to be hitting either a big button to get out of here or a defensive. I do Time Dilate myself, and I hit that Rewind, and now the boss is dead. However, you're going to see that similar to traditional Danglin Priory video classics, which happened in my plus 14, we forgot count. If you watch my plus 14 video, you'll find it pretty ironic because we also forgot count in that video where we had Yoda running around at the very end of the key trying to track down a footman. So as we go in here, we have about 45 seconds to kill off one Lightspawn. Overall, I think that this is an amazing pres key, and it's probably my favorite key to heal this season. It's also my favorite key to tank, and as well I do enjoy DPSing it, as I think there's a lot of skill involved in planning out your defensives and your offensive uses. I think pres does excel in this key, but it is very difficult to teach your team on how to do it without things like Mindsoothe and Power Word Shield. But hopefully this video helped alleviate some of those concerns and showed you that this key is very easily doable without those buttons, and hopefully as well helps you in your journey in becoming a better Preservation Evoker or as you're hunting for Mythic Plus title. If you like this kind of content and want to see more, feel free to drop something in the comments. I do post a lot of different content on my channel, including guides and walkthroughs for tanking, healing, and DPSing, but as well, if you want to see something different, feel free to let me know. I have a Discord as well where I post all of my routes, my UI, and any questions I have for free. So if you want to come drop by and join the conversation, feel free and I'll link it below. Or come drop by on Twitch where I stream pretty regularly. Thanks again for all the support and all the love, and I appreciate you watching this video. Again, I'll catch you guys in the next one.